When the Jedi fell and the Republic crumbled, Emperor Palpatine stood alone at the pinnacle of galactic power. But for the newly crowned ruler of the galaxy, the rise of the Empire was only the beginning. In Legends, the 19-year gap between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope was filled with violence, deception, and a dark transformation of the galaxy that went far beyond what we ever saw on screen. Palpatine didn't just rule, he reshaped the galaxy in his image. From exterminating the Jedi to rebuilding Sith knowledge, and from crushing political resistance to wielding ancient dark side rituals, this is the full story of Palpatine's reign in the years between the fall of the Jedi and the rise of the Rebellion. The transformation from Republic to Empire began immediately. On paper, the changes seemed superficial. The Republic became the Galactic Empire, the Grand Army became the Imperial Army and Navy, and Coruscant became known as Imperial Center. But beneath those new names, Palpatine was constructing an entirely new order, one rooted in fear, dominance, and obedience. The Jedi Temple was gutted and rebuilt into the Imperial Palace. This served not only as a symbolic erasure of the Jedi Order, but as a functional seat of dark power. Within its repurposed halls, Palpatine surrounded himself with artifacts, surveillance equipment, and layers of security that rivaled the defenses of any military base. He no longer needed to hide his power, he wore it like a crown. The Grand Republic Medical Facility, once a center of healing, became a symbol of totalitarian medicine and experimentation. The very halls where Darth Vader had been rebuilt into a monstrous cyborg were now a hub for bioengineering, dark-side experimentation, and elite medical manipulation. It was here that the Empire began experimenting with genetic tracking, identifying Force-sensitive lineages, and terminating them. The Galactic Senate still existed, but only as a puppet body to give the illusion of democracy. Real power now belonged to the Emperor and his inner circle. Palpatine appointed Sate Pestage and Mas Amida to act as his proxy for public affairs and preside over what little remained of the Senate's legislative function. Behind closed doors, the Senate had no authority. Its existence was merely a tool for controlling dissent through bureaucracy. Palpatine reshaped the military as well. Clone troopers, once the pride of the Republic, were discarded. Accelerated aging, lack of loyalty to the new ideology, and diminishing utility made them obsolete. They were replaced with conscripted human recruits, trained in propaganda-fueled academies across the galaxy. These stormtroopers were not bred for individuality or valor, they were molded into symbols of faceless power. Military academies became central to the Imperial war machine. Cadets were trained in military doctrine, strategy, and ideology. Individual thought was discouraged. Loyalty to the Empire and the Emperor became the highest virtues. Imperial intelligence became a monster of surveillance and paranoia. Their reach extended into every sector, every city, every cantina. The Imperial Security Bureau, meanwhile, served as a political watchdog, monitoring loyalty, interrogating suspects, and silencing anyone who dared oppose the new order. Together, these organizations created a network of fear that blanketed the stars. Compnor, the Commission for the Preservation of the New Order, was Palpatine's ideological machine. Through education, media, and cultural programming, they rewrote history, redefined morality, and re-engineered society. To live in the Empire was to worship the Empire. Citizens who resisted the indoctrination faced harsh re-education, imprisonment, or execution. Loyalty was no longer just expected, it was mandatory. Though the Jedi Order was shattered, Palpatine knew that some survivors remained. While he didn't consider them a real threat to the Empire, he did wish for their complete eradication. Across the galaxy, Jedi who had escaped the Purge were hunted by elite units, informants, and Sith assassins. Palpatine weaponized knowledge, using corrupted Jedi like Bagor Sadet to bait others out of hiding. Sadet, once a noble Jedi Master, was twisted into a vessel of dark side madness, used by the Empire to manipulate and betray those who still trusted him. Survivors were offered false hope, broadcasts of refuge, hidden havens, or redemption missions, only to be ambushed, captured, and executed. Others were brought to secret Imperial labs, where their bodies and minds were subjected to brutal experiments. Palpatine sought not only to erase them, but to study them, break their connection to the Force, dissect their resistance, and twist their potential into something he could control. Vader was Palpatine's enforcer, but also a problem. In one notorious incident, Vader was instructed to lure 5 Jedi into a trap and bring them in alive. Instead, he slaughtered them all, ignoring Palpatine's orders. The Emperor was enraged, but pragmatic. He transformed the massacre into a propaganda campaign, framing Vader as the unstoppable hand of Imperial justice. The propaganda worked. HoloNet broadcasts depicted Vader not as a tragic figure, but as the Empire's ultimate weapon. Survivors were too afraid to resist. Those who once would have risen in defiance now fled, hid, or surrendered without a fight. Palpatine's strategy was clear: make the Jedi seem completely defeated. Palpatine's public empire was built with steel and soldiers. His private empire was built with shadows. Deep in the core worlds lay Biss, a secret fortress of the dark side. Accessible only by coded hyperspace lanes, Biss was where the true Sith Empire festered. It was here that Palpatine gathered his most loyal adepts, dark side initiates, failed Jedi, and Force-sensitive children stolen from their homes. This world became a crucible of dark energy. On Biss, ancient Sith scrolls were decoded and rituals were rediscovered. Palpatine began work on cloning, body transference, and essence transfer, a contingency that would later define his attempts at immortality. The Emperor wasn't just preparing to rule the galaxy, he was preparing to rule it forever. Even with his power consolidated, Palpatine was never safe. The galaxy, after all, was full of ambitious traitors. General Gentis, a trusted officer, launched one of the most dangerous plots of Palpatine's reign. Using a network of sympathetic Imperial cadets, he planted bombs in the Imperial Palace and unleashed a designed virus, Aorth-6, through the air systems. It targeted Palpatine specifically, consuming him from the inside. The Emperor barely survived, relying on the dark side to keep his organs functioning. Vader, alongside Moff Tracta and a young officer named Tom, raced to retrieve a cure from the secure prison known as the Prism. They succeeded, but the message was clear. Even within the Empire, resistance burned. Palpatine responded with fire. Gentis and every conspirator were executed. Hundreds of suspected officers were purged from the ranks. New loyalty protocols were established, and the ISB's power increased tenfold. Where fear had failed, terror would now reign. More than just a setback, the Gentis coup gave Palpatine justification for a deeper militarization of the bureaucracy. Civilian departments were further marginalized. The military-industrial complex grew exponentially, feeding research into weapons development, surveillance infrastructure, and Force-related experimentation. The Emperor now treated every civilian as a potential traitor, and every officer as expendable. Palpatine had inherited a fractured galaxy. The war-torn Outer Rim was filled with separatist remnants, pirate kingdoms, and neutral systems unwilling to submit to the Empire. He turned to Vader and Grand Moff Tarkin to bring these regions to heel. Their approach was methodical: identify resistance and crush it completely. Tarkin's doctrine emphasized fear as a tool: make examples, instill terror, and enforce compliance through reputation alone. Worlds that resisted were obliterated. Gibad was infected with a nanovirus that collapsed society. Kamas, once a beacon of diplomacy, was bombarded from orbit and burned to the bedrock. The message was clear: defy the Empire and you would be punished with extinction. Entire sectors were pacified through overwhelming military occupation. The Empire's bureaucracy grew bloated, but its will remained singular: total control. Palpatine also used the conflict as a crucible to test Vader. The Emperor watched his apprentice closely during these campaigns, probing for signs of weakness, remorse, or rebellion. When Vader succeeded, Palpatine praised him as a symbol of Imperial strength. When he failed, he was punished, reminded that even he was replaceable. These reconquest campaigns also helped test new weapon prototypes. Palpatine's obsession with efficiency extended to genocide. He experimented with the use of atmospheric poison bombs, sonic disruptors, and low-orbit firestorms. Entire species were extinguished, and their names erased from the archives. The Death Star was not Palpatine's only nightmare. Long before it neared completion, other superweapons were developed in secret. The Eye of Palpatine, a massive dreadnought, was built to exterminate Jedi sanctuaries with overwhelming firepower. It vanished into obscurity due to sabotage, but remained a symbol of Palpatine's obsession with ultimate force. Star Destroyers became instruments of psychological warfare. Entire populations submitted not because they were conquered, but because they believed resistance was futile. Alongside the Death Star, Palpatine also commissioned the World Devastators, the Sun Crusher, and Galaxy Guns, though most would remain in development or concept stages until after the Galactic Civil War. Still, the vision was clear. One day, Palpatine would no longer need fleets. He would need only the press of a button to annihilate any world. The Imperial Senate, once the jewel of galactic civilization, had become a farce. Palpatine allowed it to exist only to maintain order among core worlds and systems that still clung to the old ways of the Republic. Senators debated, issued proposals, and petitioned grievances, but nothing actually changed. Real power belonged to the Moffs and regional governors. When the time came, Palpatine eliminated the Senate entirely. He cited treason, inefficiency, and the rise of terrorism. With the Death Star ready, there was no longer any need for pretense. The last vestiges of the Republic were erased with the stroke of a pen, and the Empire was now a complete dictatorship. Saint Pestage and the Emperor's ruling circle helped manage the galactic economy, ensuring that war manufacturing took precedence over civilian development. Palpatine's inner court also oversaw large propaganda campaigns that ensured the destruction of Alderaan was viewed not as an atrocity, but as a necessary sacrifice for galactic peace. Palpatine's reign as Emperor between Episodes 3 and 4 was not just a period of rule, it was a systematic transformation of the galaxy. Through manipulation, bloodshed, ancient Sith knowledge, and absolute control, he rebuilt every system, rewrote every law, and buried the Jedi Order beneath layers of fear. He built more than an empire. He built a machine, one that consumed worlds, crushed identities, and rewrote history to place him at the center of all things. By the time the Death Star hovered in the skies over Alderaan, Palpatine was in complete control. Or so he thought. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. And as always, may the Force be with you.